Thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
I think this is a conversation that, if I'm honest, is quite selfish because it's more for me to understand what's going on and get my take on things, and hopefully we can get some good stuff for everybody else to take away. But if you wouldn't mind just giving yourself an introduction to yourself and the project, and then we'll sort of go from there.
Sure. So I'm Kirstie, and I'm the CEO of the King's Arms Project in Bedford. So the project, King's Arms Project, has been around since 1989. Actually, started quite a while ago now, and I wasn't involved at that point. But it started really as a result of somebody reaching out to somebody else who needed help. So that the lady who founded it was just driving down a street in the night, in the middle of the night, and somebody kind of sort of staggered out into the road in front of her. So she stopped to help and realised that that person had nowhere to go that night and was sort of a distressed female, really. So she took her home and gave her a bed for the night, and then worked the next day to try and help her find a solution to her problems. And from there, the project was born, kind of a vision, I think, then sort of developed to think, well, if this one lady's here, there must be more
Mm.
people who are lonely and isolated and need support. And so the project started from there, and I got involved as a trustee about 15 years ago, and then became the CEO just over 5 years ago.
Wow. Okay. In the sort of 15 years that you've been involved, what's the, has there been any trends of it, things getting better or worse generally, or how, what's your take on being on the last sort of 15 years as a wider scale?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've noticed probably the most was leading up to COVID, there was an increasing number of rough sleepers on the streets.
Hmm.
And so when the project first started in the early 90s, one of the key areas of work was we opened up a night shelter, which used to be on Clarendon Street and was there right up until 2020. And that was an 18-bed night shelter. And when that first started, there were a number of rough sleepers on the street who were what we would probably describe as entrenched, which maybe isn't a very nice word to
Hmm.
use, but I guess describes the fact that some of the people who we would find had been rough sleeping for many years, for a whole variety of reasons. And it took a long time for those people to feel safe and comfortable to come inside to sleep,
Right.
basically. So probably over those years in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were able to provide somewhere for most people who were rough sleeping to be able to have a bed for the night. Not exclusively, and not everybody who's outside does want to come in. Um, but in the main, we were able to do that. But then we found, certainly leading up to COVID, that there were increasing numbers of people sleeping rough, and a lot of that was due to people coming across from Eastern Europe, who had no rights and no ability to be able to access any other kind of accommodation or help. So they were sleeping in encampments around the town. And I'm sure people who have been around for very long will probably remember that. So there were numbers of kind of tents building up around the river and in certain places. And so prior to COVID in 2020, when everybody came in at that point, there was up to something like 75 people sleeping rough on the streets, which was an incredibly high
Mm.
number for a town of our size.
Yeah.
And that would have been a real mix of a real mix of people, um, but yeah, people from all over the world.
I don't know why I always just assumed it was people from Bedford or people from the UK. Um, why is it a case of people are coming over to effectively have nowhere? Is it a case of that they just got nowhere else to go normally, and they come to the UK, and that's kind of the only other option they have? They'd rather sleep on the streets in the UK than be where they were from.
Oh, Luke, it's so complicated. And I know that there's a load of mixed opinions.
Mm.
Obviously, we know that about people who are kind of coming into the UK from other nations. Um, and one of the things that I have really learned is in all of these instances that, um, and for us as a project, certainly we would take the view of trying really hard to think about how we can be kind of curious about someone's circumstances as opposed to critical of the
Yeah.
choices that they've made, and try and our starting place be one of how can we be generous and kind in these moments rather than judgmental and critical,
Mm.
because um, as we've got to know individuals over time, you realize there's a story behind everybody's journey.
Mm.
And those stories are often things that we would resonate with. So often it's stories of people fleeing. I mean, who wouldn't flee persecution
Yeah.
or war? Who wouldn't want to be able to provide for their families? Who wouldn't want to remove themselves or their families from kind of violent or unpleasant circumstances? Um, and many times they're people who have found themselves destitute or desperate in their own nation, and are looking to be able to provide for themselves, for their family, and to live to contribute to a society, and build community. And so people, in our experience, don't make journeys lightly and don't leave their nations lightly,
Mm.
because they're leaving their homes and they're leaving their cultures and they're leaving their family and they're leaving their friends. And that's a really, really big deal. And so often people arrive, sometimes with quite complex struggles in their own lives because of some of that trauma that they've left behind, but with a desire to, they're here because they want to be able to progress and move forward. And that's not obviously exclusively true, but is certainly true of numbers of people who we've met. Um, and then as to why they end up in Bedford, I think sometimes it's because people have friends here and they have contacts and there's already community. And of course, we all want community. We all want to be around people who understand us, know us, maybe speak our language. And so people are looking for a place of refuge, and they're looking for somewhere where they can belong, looking for somewhere where they've got a friendly neighbour, and looking for somewhere where they can hopefully work and contribute. And so that would probably be true of the vast majority of people who we meet.
Mm. I think there's always the minority of situations that feed the ideas of everyone being the same. So there's always a situation where this person did this, or people come over and do the X, Y, and Z,
Mm,
and that's always the narrative that gets fed indefinitely, isn't it? For everyone, tied everyone with the same brush, and that's kind of how it is. But you don't even just being honest. I don't often sit there and think how difficult it would be. You kind of I appreciate that you got to leave when things are tough, but leaving your family and your friends and your way of life and your sometimes your religion or everything's changed and been really different to be fundamentally it hasn't worked out as well as you planned either because you could be sleeping rough now.
mm,
So it's not just an easy thing to do. And I think I think there's always a feeling, and again, being 100% honest, there's been moments where I've just thought that it's a decision that you kind of it's drugs or it's alcohol or it's something that have meant that you are there, as opposed to sometimes things just don't work out or you've tried to make yourself your life better, and that's just not life hasn't planned as you kind of come out as you've planned it. Um, so yeah, it's also probably a difficult message to get out when there's so much talk of it at the moment, isn't there?
mm,
It's all over the news of people coming into the UK, or it must be really hard to be able to explain that these are people. It takes away from people being people, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. We sort of, sometimes it feels to me as if we're drawing the lines in the wrong places and forgetting that we're all part of this thing called humanity.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us to, and we lose something of that if we forget what it is to be kind to people and to be generous. And like I say, remember everybody has a story. And
Mm,
I'm not, I'm take the politics away from it if you, I know it's very hard to do that,
mm,
but I'm not advocating that, well, that means you should just have open borders and everybody should be able to go where they like, because that's actually not going to be safe or necessarily work well for anybody.
mm,
I don't think. Um, but I do think that we need to be very cautious that we don't start labeling people in a way that's really unhelpful and unkind. I don't think it gets us anywhere.
Mm.
Yeah, and people move about for all kinds of reasons. Like we say, ultimately, a lot of the values that they hold won't be that different.
Mm.
You know, most people do want to work and do want to provide, and we would probably say that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And again, we can assume that people are coming over have all kinds of issues, and but so but so do we. You know,
Yeah.
so do you and I. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just who's to say that one's better or worse than the other. I think, and as soon as we start to go down that road, that feels a bit dangerous to me.
Yeah. I completely agree, and I think um, you're absolutely right. Everyone, we're all a part of this sort of human race, and I think that it's really difficult. It's a difficult one when at the moment people are. It's very it's getting tough now financially. You can really see it. I think that there's not many people that would say, "Oh, I haven't noticed that that's gone up and that's gone up." I was having a sort of conversation with someone yesterday, and I bought a silly example of chicken. You know, chicken's in a bag, right? When it's £8.50.
Yeah,
Like that's nuts. Like
yeah.
that is crazy. But everything is becoming more expensive, and I think that there's a trend where things become more expensive, and I've seen that like the corner shops and the little Tesco's locals are getting big plastic around them because things are getting tough and people are getting desperate. I feel like we're kind of starting to see that now,
Yeah.
and it's hard to not feel. I always get really upset. I've got a 2-year-old, nearly 2-year-old. That's his artwork behind. It's always really sad when you go to buy nappies and formula, and that's in the plastic wrapped up with the security things on. You
Mm.
think there's some people that are really struggling that can't afford to buy formula for their baby.
Mm.
That's a reality that so many people are so detached from, that when there is someone like that, you're so protected from that in your nice warm home that there's lots of people that can't afford to go get formula for their baby.
It is shocking. I mean, we work with increasingly our outreach team are working with people who are, sleeping in their cars because they have work, but they can't
Mm.
afford to live anywhere else. And other partners who I know also encountering people in those situations. And you're quite right. The levels of poverty are definitely increasing, and some of those basic needs people are struggling to meet.
Mm. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about a minimum wage roles. It's very like realistically to say that you're only a couple of paychecks away from being in really really difficult, and cafes aren't, people can't afford to go out, and it's this real kind of domino effect, isn't there?
Yeah.
That people, like I say, we're detached until it becomes real to you, and then you kind of have a little bit, the empathy comes back a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I think one of the sort of key things that we've learned, certainly at King's Arms Project, is that community is what makes a massive difference to people. And we can talk about financial poverty, which many people are experiencing, but also there's a poverty of relationships, and there's a poverty of imagination. And
Mm.
so some of what I think people struggle with is not having the networks and the connections which can help them. And yeah, we often hear banded about, we're all only a few paychecks away from homelessness. But the reality is, Luke, we're not, because if you and I found ourselves in that situation where, we lost our jobs, or, some kind of massive pay cut or what have you, we wouldn't be homeless
Mm.
because, I have family that
Yeah.
would put me up. I have friends that would help me, or, I have an education that would enable me to lever myself into a different situation. Um, so my starting place is so different to
Yeah.
some other people. And actually it often is the community and relationships that people lack. And that's kind of one of the things that we certainly have tried really hard over the years to build up and build a place where people can kind of have those sort of peer relationships, and garner some of that network really, so that as time moves on, we they become a bit more resilient because
Mm.
their own support network is more resilient.
It's such a yeah, it's absolutely true. I kind of not. something that I think about. If I lost a job or didn't have any money, I'll go to my mum's or my dad's, and that's the luxury that I have. And I'd be able to find another job, and yeah, it wouldn't be, the starting point is very different. Um, which makes it kind of really hard to really put yourself in the shoes of someone that's in that situation, because again, so detached from it. What's the process look like from, you said the sort of people that are sleeping in cars, and how are you, like, in my mind, if I was if someone's in that situation, how do you find those people if they're not reaching out to you, which I can imagine they're quite often not, because they don't necessarily know how to. How do you find those, and what does the process look like in supporting those people?
Mm. So, a few different things really. So sometimes people do come to us. So they'll come and kind of come to the door, and we can sort of help support people, be it through uh, doing laundry or giving someone the opportunity to kind of have a shower and that kind of thing. Because I guess I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes you can forget the fact that if you're
Mm,
sleeping, even if you're in a car or something, you just can't do those
yeah, for
basic
sure.
things. So we kind of offer that sort of support, as does Smart at the Prebend Day Centre. So
Hmm.
there's opportunities there for people to go to access those facilities as well. Um, and then, so there's a combination of that, people coming in, and then sometimes people will be found. So particularly the Smart outreach team will go out and about, often early in the morning, a few times a week, to places where we know there's often, because there are places where people tend to stay,
Hmm.
and then as well, sometimes members of the public will kind of let us know if they think they found somebody. So there's a kind of system called Street Link, which, if as a member of the public you find somebody who you think is rough sleeping, you can contact Street Link kind of via the internet, or just it's a phone number, and then that location gets pinged to the kind of team that's local that can then go and find that person.
Right.
So yeah, it's a mixture of those things. And then sometimes again, those people are like, this is just our circumstance, we're living with it. Yes, if you could help me with this, this and this, and I'll kind of work my way out of it. Sometimes there are things we can do to help people, whether it be looking at how could are you eligible for temporary accommodation, and can we help you access that in some shape or form. So there are support systems in place to help people, and yeah, but obviously it's dependent on their choices.
Yeah. In terms of accommodations that are available, how does that work? Is it a case of the charity funds locations, or is it through government? What's the process of having? Is there much availability for of accommodation?
I mean, there's a shortage of housing generally.
Hmm.
So again, this is sometimes my frustration around the narrative that gets pushed, particularly around migrants, or sort of people from other countries getting houses before us, and
Yeah,
this
there's a
kind of
big narrative that you turn up and you've got a house and
yeah,
get this money
yeah,
and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah. I mean, the reality is there's been a severe lack of investment in housing in this country for a long
Mm.
time, and so it's no fault of any one particular people group or a particular local authority. I think just generally speaking, there's been such a lack of investment that we are desperately short of housing that is affordable for people who actually need it.
Hmm.
And that issue is only going to get resolved over a period of time when more houses are built that people can genuinely afford to live
Yeah.
in. So that's kind of one thing in a longer term plan. And on that, I suppose, local authorities, ours included, have to be prepared for more houses to be built, because if we don't build more houses, the problem's only going to increase. And
Mm.
so it can be a bit frustrating sometimes when you see planning applications rejected, and people in neighborhoods can get, understandably, I guess, protective about their own spaces. But the reality is people need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And so we need to build houses that allow for that. Um, and then there's a variety of ways in which people can access housing. So the council have a large portfolio of what we describe as temporary accommodation, which is if somebody has, the people do have a statutory right to accommodate to be accommodated, and so if they are legitimately homeless and they're eligible for benefits and support, then the council will put them up in what we call temporary accommodation,
Hmm.
which is their kind of different sort of spaces. And the idea of that is that it is supposed to be temporary, whilst that person can get on the housing register or source kind of something more permanent. So again, a bit of a misnomer about people coming into this country and just rinsing us of benefits. If a lot of people, before people have settled status, they're unable to access any of that. So there's no housing benefit, there's no universal credit, there's no
Mm.
benefits for people who come into the UK without sort of settled status or permission, which is one of the issues as to why we have destitute people. Um, so there's temporary accommodation, and then there are some housing providers, such as ourselves, which provide what we would call supported accommodation. So for people who perhaps need a bit of extra help,
Hmm.
and it's really only a small number of people. So most people just need housing, and there's no complex needs or issues attached. They
Yeah.
just need somewhere to live. But for some people, their struggle with accommodation is because they've got some other struggles in life, and so holding down a tenancy may be challenging for them. And one of the best ways that we can help ensure people can maintain tenancies is to give them a bit of support. And supported housing does that. So the idea is that someone lives in supported accommodation. That might look like, so in our instance, we have 8 or 9 houses across the borough which have maybe 3 or 4 people each living in them. So it's just a normal house,
Right.
just kind of, and those people live in the property. Some of them are working, some of them won't be, and we just provide some support. So if people need support to access medical appointments or to help them kind of process some things that are going on in life, if they need support, perhaps working through building relationships with somebody or getting into work, all that kind of thing. So we help with those kind of issues. And there's a number of other providers across the town that do that as well. There is sometimes some controversy around supported accommodation because there is a view that it can sometimes keep people a bit stuck in
Right.
that kind of system. One of the issues with it is expensive if you're working. So the challenge is that someone gets into supported accommodation, you're able to claim housing benefit for those individuals, but it'll be at an enhanced rate because they're in a supported setting,
Right.
which that individual doesn't have to pay, the housing benefit covers. But then as soon as that person gets employment, they then have to pay the rent. And the rent is high because it's supported accommodation. So
Yeah.
you're paying for all the extra bits that come with it.
Right.
So the challenge is people can then get stuck in supported
'Cause they
accommodation
can't afford to get
and
out.
they can't afford to get out, and there's no incentive to work. And so certainly in the model that we run, we've created space for people to work with us. And so we kind of have a mixed portfolio, some people working, some people not. And we sort of balance the books in a way that means that we can always have a certain percentage of people in work, because the idea is you want people to move into independence in terms of not having to be in that situation. But that's challenging, that's quite difficult.
Mm.
And again, there's some criticism of some supported housing providers who take the money and don't provide the support. And so it's not a system without fault or controversy,
Yeah.
but there's lots of really good people within it as well who do offer good support, who really look out for the clients who are living with them, and it can be a really good catalyst for people to get into a better place.
Mm.
And certainly people who've lived with us um, often talk about, oh goodness, I found family, I've found friends, I've been able to sort of, I've started doing things I never thought I'd be able to start. I've got a safe space, I've got a roof over my head. And so there's lots of really good and positive bits of work out there.
Sounds like quite a rewarding process when those things come to those types of stories.
Oh, Luke, it's amazing. It's amazing the difference that we see in people. We sort of, for us, we have the amazing privilege of seeing some people who come to our door maybe, as a rough sleeper. So I'm thinking back to, some individuals who came through our winter night shelter last year, for example. So we run a winter night shelter, which we're opening again this year on the 1st of December, which is emergency access. So anybody, no referral, doesn't matter whether you've got local connection. if you find yourself having to sleep on the streets at 7:30 at night during the winter, you can come to the winter night shelter, and as long as that person's safe and stable to come in, we'll provide accommodation for them and hot food, etc. And we met, we meet each. This is the third year we're doing it, and we've had over 100 guests each year, and so it's a lot of people who
Yeah.
we meet over the winter period. And a very small number of those people end up staying with us in our supported accommodation. So the majority will be housed, through other supported accommodation providers or through temporary accommodation, and some will end up with us. And so we then get the privilege of seeing that person a year on thriving, in having come off the streets,
Mm.
nowhere to go, destitute, pretty desperate, to being in a place where they're accessing courses with us. Their well-being is, considerably improved. They're smiling, they're happy, and they've got somewhere they can call home, where they're cooking their own meals, being able to walk out their bedroom door into their own shower. They've got friends. It is hugely rewarding, and to see people actually being able to have a go at life. And we had one guy last year who came to us really in a very, very poorly, and very hopeless. And he'd said himself, you could see, you kind of have that um, dead-eyed look, really, where I
Hmm.
think someone's really at the end of themselves. And he stayed with us pretty much the whole winter, moved into a recovery house at the end of that period, just a completely different man. And as he left, there was a beautiful moment. He kind of lined all the staff up in the hallway at the end of the winter period, and just said, you guys saved my life, and you've become my family, and
Wow.
I cannot thank you enough. And he's bright eyed, and he's about town, and he's working, and he's living his life. And that's something that we did, other than just be kind enough and patient enough to create space for someone to rediscover their dignity and their self-worth, and realize that, okay, so it's that moment, I think, Luke, of where we talk about what it's like to hold hope for somebody when they can't hold hope for themselves.
Right.
So sometimes there's those moments when we can see in people they've really lost energy for life, and they've lost a vision for what their life could look like, and we know it's there, we all have it, um, but it's got a bit lost in the darkness of life, if you like. And so, and in those moments, we will try and hold hope for that person for a period of time until they're able to hold it for themselves.
Yeah.
And that really just is about providing space and opportunity for people to reflect, look back a little bit, look forward. And it's amazing, and we meet some amazing people who are so resilient and so brave and courageous, who will have experienced things that you and I would never think about experiencing. It would never occur to us that life could look as bad as that may
Yeah.
be. And yet they're able to recover from that. And that's an amazing strength in the community as well. Again, we can be a bit disparaging of people who we see living sort of rough lives, but there is so much strength and resilience and courage in those individuals. It's humbling, actually.
Yeah. Just as you're sort of talking here, I'm sort of reflecting on how it's so easy to get caught up in life and stresses and haven't got this or haven't got that, and that could be I haven't got a new car or I haven't got that new winter jacket that I wanted to get, and it's so easy. But there's people out there that have real struggles and real things that's happened to them that doesn't you can't compare everything in life. That
For
doesn't mean
sure.
that they've had a bad life, so I'm going to be have to feel bad about it. And
Yeah.
there is a balance, but sometimes it's kind of that like I say, be humbling of the fact that sometimes just be happy with the fact that you go home to a nice warm house and you can have a hot shower.
Yeah.
You don't have to be grateful and sort of every night when you do that, but reflecting on that
Yeah.
is important, I think, too,
Yeah.
to realize that you have not only that, you have your family around you, you have friends, you have that community that
Yeah.
some people I think there's also this perception that people don't want to be helped. People want to just be living that life. They want that sort of life. But there's people out there that just need that space, like you said, that space where someone can help them, support them, kind of feel a little bit of love
Yeah.
to change their life. And it's easy to just say, well, they're on the streets because they're drug addicts or because they're alcoholics or because they've made choices to be there, which isn't, sometimes that might be the situation, but what, that's not always the case, right? And
Mm.
I think it's sometimes understanding that like for me, I want to be able to help, but it's an understanding knowing how what that looks like.
Mm.
So does that mean that I support by, like, say, the night shelter? How is that funded? Is it that you can help fund that, or is it that you can provide food for that? Like,
Mm.
what does help look like
Mm.
for people that want to be able to do it that aren't aware of what that looks
Mm.
like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are a number of different ways that people can do that. I guess given, and we often, we talk about, can you sort of give your time or your talent or your treasure? What is
Hmm.
it that you've got that you can give? And so the night shelter is a great example of that, I suppose. And you just sort of saying about how I guess there's a humilityness in realizing and a gratefulness that, we have, it's great that we have the lives that we have. We have, like I say, we have warm, comfortable homes, and there's no, that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And we don't want to
Yeah,
be giving that up. But there is also a place of recognizing, okay, but from this place, I have got resource that
yeah,
means I can help other people who aren't in that situation. And the night shelter came about in that way, really, because I was, where I walk my dogs, across the fields, there was a young man that was camping in the woods where I walk, and we knew him because he had actually accessed us for support, and he had come into the UK, and as a boy actually. So not of his own volition, he'd been brought over by his family, and his family had left him, and
wow,
so he was a very young man left completely on his own to fend for himself. No access to benefits, no access to anything. So he was destitute, um, and camping in the woods. And it was autumn time, and I was kind of walking back and forth past his tent each day with the dogs, going home to my nice warm kitchen where my kids were arguing about which cereal they're going to have for breakfast that day, getting in our car and going to work. And I was thinking, this cannot be right.
mm,
This guy is going to be out here all winter unless we do something. And you kind of come home to your own circumstances and think, well, we need to be able to do something here. And so for me, obviously, I'm in the position where I'm working for an organisation that actually physically can do something about that. So we have the premises and the expertise to say, well, actually, we can provide something. We can
yeah,
provide an emergency winter night shelter because we know how to run this. But we can't do that by ourselves. So we have the expertise to set it up, and we have the connections within the council and wider partners to be able to get the support. But we quickly realised, okay, we can't do this without funding, and the council had no money for it at that point either, because they had been looking after people post COVID for so long.
mm,
It was financially really challenging, and so actually in that instance, in the first year, that it was virtually entirely supported by finance from the community. So different organisations and people who were able to finance that project financed it for us.
wow,
And then we realized, I kind of had said, okay, we'll do this. Let's do it. We can set it up, but we can't run it. We don't have the staff capacity to do that. So I said, I think we need about 30 odd volunteers to make this happen. So let's do that. And I went home and did the maths and thought, oh my gosh, no, it's more like 130.
wow,
And then thought, what have we done? Like, how is that? How is this going to work?
yeah,
But do you know what, Luke? People flooded to do it.
wow,
They literally flooded to do it. And we met the most amazing group of people who gave their time to either come and serve breakfast in the mornings or come and do an evening shift, or provide meals. So we provide home cooked meals every day for people. People who bring donations of supplies that clients need, or give financially. And so all of those different ways are ways in which people can help. So it may be that you have games or puzzles or things that people would like to do of an evening, and that's been a real blessing. It may be that people have warm clothes that they can give. That's been a real blessing. It may be that people can financially support us, which does really help, because it's actually a very cheap way to look after people, but it still costs
yeah,
money. And so people's donations are well used in that respect. Or it may be that you have your time and people want to volunteer and come and either do an evening shift with us. So we kind of have an evening shift that runs between 7:30 and 10:30, which is where so we let guests in at 7:30 in the evening, and it's just a case of serving the food that's been provided, chatting to people, just kind of being around, and then everyone goes to bed at 10:30. And that team leaves for the night, and then we have a team that comes on in the morning to sort of do breakfast. So it's an hour and a half in the morning, maybe before work. It's kind of 7 till 8:30. And so people give their time to do that, or they make the meals for us and provide, a meal for somebody for that evening. So there's lots. So in that respect, lots of different ways in which people can help.
In that thought, then, what would that process look like? Say, for example, someone wanted to offer some clothes, or they wanted to make some meals. How would they go about doing that? Do they reach out to you? What's the process look like?
So they can just do that. So they can reach out to us via our website. You can find us on the internet. You can ring us up. You can turn up. We're at 56 Harper Street in the 9 to 5 in the week. So you can turn up and drop stuff off. If you're interested in volunteering or finding out more about how to do that, all of that information is on the website. It's very visible because we're literally at the start of the Winter Night Shelter campaign for this year. So, and there are other ways that people volunteer with us as well. So we have numbers of people who come and help support some of the courses we run for people who have helped us teach our clients to play the guitar, to barber, to do artwork. We have people who've come and helped with interview skills, CV writing, IT stuff, carpentry, all kinds of things. So people have come and said, look, I've got this skill, I can do this, I can help teach people this. People have come and taught English language. People who come and just do some of our sort of social sort of coffee and connect, go for a walk, take people fishing, a whole variety of different things.
Wow.
So there's lots of different ways in which people can help if that's what they kind of feel moved to do.
It's also really nice to hear that there's so many good people that want to go and help.
Oh my gosh, Luke, there are loads. Bedford is a hugely generous and kind town. It really, really is. And sometimes it can feel as if the narrative is a bit negative.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that's a very small group of people, because in the main, we see really, really positive responses from people who want to help, who have a kind heart, who can see the need, and most people have a sense of humility around that actually, and want to be able to help in some shape or form. And so, yeah, I think that's I would say actually it's one of Bedford's unique selling points. I think we really are a kind place. And often you see people asking for help, this, and this, and often people kind of offering advice. And yes, sometimes you get people spinning the negative stuff. And that is a real shame. But I mean, everyone's entitled to their views. But yeah, I think that I think it's a good place.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that I'm in a bit of a kind of mental moral dilemma with things at the moment, because I think that I don't go into Bedford very much. I don't spend much time in the town or kind of outside it really. I'm kind of villages outside and things like that. But just from my own perspective, when I drive through, Bedford's feeling more bleak than it ever has done. I think that it's quieter, shops shut in and things like that. You do see people that are sleeping rough or kind of walking around that obviously not in their best frame of mind. And then you've got the narratives that are being put out there by people that were in crisis, and it's really hard for me to know what is true. And that's the real hard one for me, where I love Bedford. It's somewhere like I was chatting to my nan the other day, and she's 80 in a few weeks, and she's born in Bedford. Her parents were born in Bedford.
Yeah.
There's a real kind of family tie and history to it. And see pictures of my great grandparents walking down the embankment with their shirts and ties and top hats and all this sort of stuff that they used to do every Sunday. And there's a real lovely, and when you look at Bedford with the river and the bridges, it's some really beautiful buildings. I just think that there's a lot of negativity that's come around recently, with a view of how it should be fixed and what needs to be done, and I just don't know enough to
Mm,
know that whether certain actions are the right ones.
mm.
Um, I kind of feel like there's a lot of just brush it under the rug and everything's going to be good, and I just don't think that's the real solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it is challenging, isn't it? And I guess the main thing I feel is I don't think any one person does have the solution.
Mm,
We live in a democracy, and we do need to, I think, be able to work within that democracy and work within sort of structures of accountability and holding each other to account for what we do and how we do it.
mm,
And as a community in Bedford, I guess as a borough, take joint responsibility as that borough. Well, how are we going to solve some of these issues?
mm,
And there are some huge strengths. I agree, and I think Bedford needs to be able to get hold a bit more of who we are and what we're about and where we can see ourselves going in the future, because we have some real strengths in terms of our, I mean, independent businesses, for example. I think we have a disproportionately high number of
mm.
independent businesses in the town, which I think is a massive strength for Bedford and something which we can really lean into. And you can see that there's a strong community among people who run businesses and have found that they can not just survive, but it seems to me thrive in
Yeah,
the town. I think there are ways in which we could help that happen a bit more readily.
yeah,
And there are ways in which we could revitalise the town centre, perhaps thinking a bit more creatively. I feel as if we've got a bit stuck in old ways and people are sort of, oh, the sort of, the high street shops have gone. The reality is that's not just unique in Bedford,
no,
it's
it's
all
not.
over the place. And
Mm,
that's town centres aren't going to be like that anymore. And we're a market town that needs to press into the diversity that we have, press into the creativity that we have, recognise and accept the fact that we are a commuter town. We are going to be a smaller town on the outskirts of, bigger cities like, Milton Keynes or just down the train line from London, and use that, I think, rather than trying to, hark back to the old days and think, oh, it'd be great if we had this black.
mm,
That's never going to happen.
yeah,
People's shopping patterns have changed, haven't they? The way we spend money has changed. That doesn't mean to say that the town centre needs to go downhill at all. It just means you need to think about, well, who is utilising it? What are they utilising it for? And how can we really make the most of that?
mm,
I think there is some real poverty, very visible in the town centre. There are definitely times when you can walk through and just think, gosh, it feels vaguely Dickensian, actually. There's a lot of people who do congregate in certain places who clearly are really struggling. But when I say a lot of people, actually, it will be a tiny percentage of people
yeah.
in terms of the whole of the
Grand
population of the
scheme of things,
town.
yeah.
Yeah. But needless to say, those people, are there for a reason. They clearly need sort of support in some shape or form. And so, again, I think just thinking a bit more creatively about, well, in the first instance, finding out why they're there. I mean, that's been one of the things that has been, again, a sort of, bit of a bugbear of mine, is that we're very quick to make assumptions
Mm,
and criticize people and judge them. I don't know if anybody's actually taken the time or trouble to ask
yeah,
anybody.
yeah,
And so that's certainly, actually, we're partnering up at the moment to do some work with street drinkers and people who are in the town centre to kind of try and create spaces where people feel safe to come in for a start and to have some conversations about, why they're where they are.
mm,
Most of those people aren't homeless. They will have somewhere to live. But it's kind of what conditions they're living in and what's causing them to have some of the issues that they have. People want community. They want to be somewhere. I'm very, very supportive of the fact that we want our town centre to be somewhere that's safe and
mm,
accessible, where everyone can thrive. But it needs to be somewhere for the whole community.
yeah,
And that includes those people who are street drinking. This is their town too.
yeah, for sure.
So, what's the struggles for them? And how can we create spaces for those individuals as well as the rest of us?
Mm,
Nobody wants to feel unsafe, or, of course, we don't. But I think if we took some time to think about, well, who are some of those people who are out a bit more visible on the street, um, and whilst they are visible, we're able to reach out and help. If those individuals become invisible, it becomes very, very difficult to do
Yeah.
anything to help. It becomes very difficult for them to access support, and it becomes very difficult for people who can support to actually know where they are.
Mm.
So that's a bit counterproductive if you, I think, just try and push things under the carpet a little bit, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Move them on or not there to not know how to fix it is not it's not a solution. It's a problem for another day.
It is, and it's also not involving the people in the town centre in that as well. And
Mm.
so, um, again, sort of talk to people who are in and around the town, and for a lot of those people, they are really up for helping.
Mm.
They're interested in knowing what's going on and what they can do to support and help. We have numbers of businesses who partner with us, which is great to help, but also people who, of their own accord, want to be able to do things. So I think, again, like I say, most people, when you really dig into it and talk to them, are usually curious and recognise the humanity behind
Yeah.
sometimes the struggles. So, but I can understand why people feel fearful. I think, I mean, when you know some of those people, there's not really anything to be fearful of. But I realise that's not the case for everybody,
Yeah.
and it can be intimidating, and nobody wants that. But I think often those individuals themselves don't want that
Mm.
either.
And I think as well that before we sort of had this conversation, I was kind of reflecting on Bedford and do I think it's got worse? Do I think it's got better? What's like my take on it? And I think that actually, when I was younger, I used to go into town when all the shops down the high street were open. It was kind of where I'd go on a Friday to get a new T-shirt for a night
Yeah,
out or whatever it may be.
yeah,
There were still people day drinking and out doing that,
yeah. Of
but
course.
because there's less people, less shops, it becomes a lot clearer.
Mm,
It's maybe they stand out more because there's not a hustle and bustle of the main high
mm.
street of people walking past all the time. So I don't think it's a case of it might not be a case that it's got significantly worse. It's just more visible.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, there's pluses and minuses to that. So no one particularly likes seeing it.
Mm,
But the other thing is that if you can see it, you're able to think, well, what can we do
mm,
about? And here is a community of people, and what can we do to help that? And like we say, we sort of think about who the town centre's for and what's the demographic of people who are using the town centre. And so, how can we create spaces that are really nice and pleasant for that
mm,
as well, that feel welcoming and
yeah.
make use of the space that we've got? And I think we really can do that. Luke, Bedford's such a rich place
Mm,
in terms of its heritage,
yeah.
the sporting culture that's here, the arts. There is so much talent in Bedford. That yeah, I think it's short sighted to suggest that it's all kind of going to the dogs, because I just don't think that's true. And that
Yeah.
for sure of course there are challenges, but there are challenges
There's
everywhere
challenges
you
everywhere.
go.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest issues for me is needing the town needing to have a vision for where it's going. I feel like that is lacking a little bit. It does
Hmm.
feel like there's no real sense of vision, of direction. I can't really see a strategy for what we're doing. Obviously, the local authority is struggling
Mm,
financially, which is going to seriously hamper what they are able to do. But as a collective, I kind of think actually we've got resources at our disposal.
mm,
But yeah, I think some strong leadership and a good sense of strategy and vision for the future would help a lot.
yeah. I think the council thing's an interesting one because I think that it's quite clear from talking to people there's not a lot of money in the council.
Mm.
But then I also feel like there's situations where it feels like rates and things are high, so there's no shops are shutting because the rates are really high, but then they're empty shops. And there's little things that just don't make really. Maybe I'm just being really naive, but I kind of feel
Yeah.
like maybe the rates aren't expensive. You're going to get more shops,
Yeah.
and you're going to get more money.
Yeah.
Like 50% of something, but better than 100% of nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just being really short sighted in that, but it feels like there's a weird kind of position where we all want the same thing, but maybe everyone needs to make a little bit of a sacrifice in doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does feel like some of those things are a little short-sighted, doesn't it? I mean, it's difficult. I'm not, neither you or I are in the positions where we're making those decisions
Mm,
and we can't see the implications of all of those things. And, I fully appreciate that sometimes from the outside, it can seem like, well, that was a bit of a weird decision. It
Mm.
doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not in possession of all the facts, so I don't know. However, I would agree with you. I think there's a strong case to be made for if you want to build up the long-term health, if you want to of a town, if you want to kind of increase that kind of feel-good factor, you have to think about what are our strengths and where are we going to be able to grow as we move forward. And if there's already a culture, which there is, and lots of creativity, lots of innovation from lots of different people groups in the town, you would think, well, let's create space to let that grow,
Mm.
because that's what's going to help move us forward. And I agree. I think it's a bit frustrating when you sort of feel like, oh gosh, people can't afford to set up businesses. Whether there's opportunities for price breaks or to do things in a gradated way, you kind of think, okay, I get that we need to save money, but I think this is cutting our noses off to spite our face. I'm
Yeah.
not sure it is actually going to really help. And I'm sure lots of different places would say, well, yes, but that's true. You can't save money on healthcare because then, if people become sicker, it becomes more expensive to look after them, which of course is true. Or if we don't educate people properly, they can't get into employment. So there's all these different ways where we could say money definitely needs to be invested earlier on in the chain in a whole load of different areas. So I'm
Yeah.
sure everywhere's got their arguments for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the sort of the health of the town, there's loads of scope.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really wish there was more money invested in
Yeah,
that.
there's so many empty spaces that
Yeah.
even if it was a case of right, you wanna I don't know, Debenhams is a massive scale, but there's smaller places where okay, well you invest in the money of doing it up and getting it to break, and we will just do a break in rates for 6 months.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get a shop that's open. It's hopefully gonna work out, and for 6 months, okay, you take a hit, but it's gonna probably be empty there anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's costing money
Yeah,
in the meantime. I mean, Debenhams is a classic example, isn't it?
yeah.
Where we'll have read recently, I'm sure, in the newspaper about that. And yeah, I just think, well, this is just nuts.
Yeah, it's a huge space, and you could make that into 10 different really cool independent businesses that everyone takes a everyone takes their own that responsibility on as a unit to say, okay, we're going to get 10 independent businesses. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we're trying to achieve.
Mm.
And then you've got, if one fails, you've got 9 others that can kind of you can work something
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to just have this emptiness,
Yeah.
which is frustrating. Like I would love to have a studio in the high street or somewhere like that where people can walk past and see us and we can do more bits and like
Yeah.
podcast stuff and all this
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. But I just think that would sink our business financially if we did that.
Yeah.
And that's just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. It's a shame.
So yeah, that's my rant over and done with. So in terms of the view going forward, is there sort of so short term? It's the winter shelter, right?
Mhm.
That's starting December.
Yeah.
That's December till when?
Middle of March, 100
Okay.
nights we run for.
Wow, that's a long time. It's a lot of effort and a lot of. But yeah. I mean, I always think even recently it's starting to get cold. I think being outside now.
Well, it works because, like I say, it's the volunteers that do it. They carry it.
Yeah.
And so they're people who, will show up once a week, once a fortnight, and do that over that kind of winter period. So yeah, it is a long old stretch, but yeah, carried by a brilliant team. So.
And then long term, I know that there's some changes in the project that are coming in terms of new names and does that come with, I know talk through sort of what that looks like, but does that mean any values are changing of the business and wider plans, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, good question. So we've been around, like I say, for sort of about 35 years, and it's only been in the last few years that we've had a presence in the town centre in the way that we have. And our work has really expanded over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. So having really been a charity that was principally focused around the night shelter and the outreach work that went on with that. Over the last 10 years, we've sort of developed the supported housing that we've just talked about, which is sort of a growing part of what we do. We have a growing outreach team. We run some commissioned contracts for resettling refugee families that have fled from war-torn parts of the world. So we do quite a lot of work in that area in Bedford and Central Beds. And then we run a lot of the courses that I was saying. So the courses through the part of our team called Pathways, which creates these sort of spaces for well-being as well as sort of employability and growth in that respect. So we've the types of services that we deliver have really grown over time, and we moved into the town centre, and over the last year or so have just been reflecting a bit on, okay, this is actually, we've changed quite a lot since we first started. What have been the common threads that run through who we are? Because these different services really have developed because we've seen a need. And so we've responded to what we've seen. And, if you like, kind of we regularly are asking ourselves, who are the poor in society today? Like,
Hmm.
where are the demographics that we're kind of wanting to reach, be it maybe care leavers, for example. I mean, care leavers have a shocking outlook, really, in many respects. And I think it's terrible statistics. I think it's something on the lines of a third of care leavers will find themselves homeless within 2 years, and it's so there are
So
some
care leavers, what does that
so
mean?
so young people who have grown up in care,
Right. Okay.
been looked after by social services, be either usually in some sort of foster care or care
Right.
homes.
Okay.
When they then become an adult at 18, then kind of you're fending for yourself,
Yeah.
really.
Okay.
And so groups of people, or I guess kind of way back in sort of biblical times, we're founded on Christian foundations, and that kind of biblical concept of look after the widows and the orphans. Who are today's widows and orphans? Who are
Right.
the people who
Yeah. Yeah.
actually need support today? And so, of course, and we realise that those things are going to change over time. So it may be right now that language learning is really important because there's a high proportion of people who don't speak English, but that might change over time. Or actually, if we're doing our jobs, there should be fewer people who are rough sleeping who need accommodation, because actually we're providing more spaces and reducing the need for that. So we were sort of thinking, what is it that really underpins everything that we do and goes across all the different areas that we work in and would continue to do so? And for us, really, it's hope that does that. We felt like it's really hope that defines us. That's one of the key values that doesn't change. We've always been people who have persevered. We don't give up. Like I said, we sort of carry hope for people when they can't carry it for themselves.
Mm.
We'll kind of look beyond the horizon and think, actually, we know that there is more for this individual. We'll just kind of keep walking with you until we find it. And when you find people in very dark places and very low places for them in their lives, being able to, I guess, kind of look into the eyes of somebody and think, actually, I believe that you can, I believe that change is possible. I believe that your circumstances can look different. It is really for us hope that underpins all of those things. And so, yeah, so we are gonna change our name. So we're gonna rebrand. We're gonna become Hope Works,
Right.
um, which we love because we feel like hope works. It does work.
Yeah.
It's a thing that it is a real thing, and it exists, and we carry it in our hearts. But also we work at hope. We work at it together.
Right.
We're
Yeah. Yeah.
working as
Yeah.
a team. We're working with our clients, people who we come into contact with. It's not a passive thing. We don't kind of sit on a chair like this and think, oh, I kind of, I hope life would look, I wish life would look
Yeah.
a bit better.
Yeah.
No, we actively work at what that looks like. And we feel like for us that really encompasses who we are and what we do. And for sure, right now, the services that we deliver, we're going to carry on doing. But I'm certain that in the future, there'll be other things that we branch out into, or other areas where we can see, or actually, let's invest a bit over here because we can see that. So, for example, you were sort of talking about poverty earlier and people struggling to make ends meet. And, we're thinking about, well, what could, for example, social diners look like? What could it be like to provide spaces where people can eat and eat together,
Mm.
but at an affordable rate, and where people can contribute their own um, sort of nation's culinary,
Yeah. Yeah.
expertise, or
Yeah.
what. So creating again, sort of, what does community look like? What does it look like for people to be able to access skills that they haven't learned in other places? What does it mean? We were talking earlier about, um, schools maybe not teaching people things like, if you're an entrepreneur, how are you going to do that? How are you going to
Yeah.
build a business? How are you going to use the talents that you have? Well, maybe one of the things we need to do is create spaces for people to be able to learn those things, because that's all stuff that helps people into employment. It helps them into independence. What kind of community spaces can we create? Where can people, um, access sort of things that improve their well-being, their mental health, those kind of things, which is sort of, again, we have loads of spaces in Bedford where we could do that. It's just creating them, linking them up,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So there's loads of there's loads of potential. I'd like to think that we can move away from the focus being as much on homelessness, because, like I said, I'd like to think and believe that over time we can prevent
Yeah.
more homelessness from happening. It's never going to go away. I mean, I think that there's always going to be people who find themselves in that situation, but as Prince William brilliantly said in his foundation, the aim is to make homelessness kind of brief, rare, and unrepeated. And I can get behind that. I'm like, yeah, that is 100% what we would aim to do.
Yeah.
It's never going to be eliminated, but we can work towards ensuring that the impact is as little as possible. But moreover, how can we try and prevent people from falling into those spaces in the
Yeah.
first place?
Yeah.
Create space that feels a bit more hopeful, like there's something worth investing in. So yeah, I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what we're saying about the whole Bedford example. You've got to lay those foundations to make it a point where it doesn't get
Yeah.
to that level.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's also about, I think it's about the visibility of that for people, because when you, like you say, when you ask people for help and support, they're there, right? But for me, like, I always think of it sounds like a silly example, but when you go to Sainsbury's and it says, like, you can add extra to your shopping and put it there.
Yeah.
I think that for me, and people feel, when I spoke about people, it's kind of the same as, they don't know where that goes, what that means. There's no connection or tangible viewing of, I'm
Yeah.
going to give my pasta there. That's going to go to someone that hasn't eaten for a week, for example. But I think talking through these, and what's really good to listen and hear from you saying what you're trying to achieve is, this is our home, right? This is Bedford. You can see that the efforts that you're doing are, and I'm sure in every town there's someone having a
Yeah.
similar conversation, thinking
Yeah.
about similar sort of things. So I think sometimes it's about just bringing that home a little bit in terms of your processing and what you're thinking and how you see it, and realizing that these people are close, but it's all fixable within reason, right? You can't, like I say, you're never going to be able to fix everything before it even gets there, because there's a lot of things out of your control, but there's so much that can be done by yourselves and individuals that want to support that, to
Yeah.
get to a point where it's not just Bedford's in chaos, it's falling apart, we're all doomed. It's, let's do those little things together to be able to enable it to a point where 2, 3, 5, 10 years time, we're in a much, the outlook of walking down the high street is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I think we have to carry that vision, right? Because we've got to believe that future is possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, people are struggling, like you say, they'll be struggling in Bedford like they're struggling anywhere else. It won't be unique to Bedford.
No.
And people are in financial difficulty. So what then are we going to do as a town to like say, to help that? And sometimes we feel like money's the solution. I'm not always convinced it is. I think there are other ways in which we could either restructure or be smarter with our resources.
Yeah.
I mean, again, just the Winter Night Shelter is a great example where all of a sudden we found, hang on, we've got this massive resource. We've got 100 plus people who are willing to help for free.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what are all the other areas and things that we could do across the town that also would mean that there are places and spaces for people to get support and help? And yes, sometimes it is the money, and of course it is, and sometimes we need to invest. And people live in shocking accommodation, and so sometimes that does need investment, because it needs to be safe, and it needs to be secure, it needs to be warm, it needs to be dry, and you need to spend money for that to happen. But sometimes it's not just about the money. Sometimes it is about the connection. It's about the community. It's about the opportunity. And again, local businesses, different employers are really good at providing those opportunities, and people who can provide working opportunities for people to get going, really good. And people that can provide opportunities, again, just for people to volunteer, to feel part of something. We're in it together. I think that's the thing. Like I say, I've never been a fan of this drawing lines, it's them and us. It's not. Whether we like it or not, we are all in this together. So let's kind of find the solutions together.
Yeah, and I think that your to your point is very clear. It's not us and them. It's not that we're good, that's bad, and that's as simple as that. And we can't. Um, I think we sort of touched on it right at the start. It's the human element of it that's just been
Mm.
taken away so much, that because you've never stepped on the streets or you'd never be in that position, that you're different or you're better or you're whatever it may be. You don't know the situations people have been in, and like you said, there's probably things that we'd never even conceive of that people have been through, that you don't know how you'd react if you went through that and what that
Yeah.
would look like.
Yeah.
So trying to understand that is hard,
Mm.
and trying to relate to that is really difficult. But I think for me, it's nice to have this conversation, because it kind of, I wanted to believe that things are better than sometimes social media and people talk around.
Mm.
There is issues, but there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of things that can be done, and I think that maybe more people need to spend time listening to the good and less focusing on the bad.
Yeah.
That's like life, though, isn't it? You'll always,
Yeah.
when you go to a restaurant, there's always 10 bad reviews for every
Yes.
5
Yeah.
good ones, because everyone likes to talk about bad stuff, don't
Yeah,
they?
we do.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we're very good at moaning.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But there's a lot of good stuff out there, which is really encouraging. So just last little bit then, just in terms of, if people do want to help, it's a case of reaching out, asking, offering what you want, what you're able to offer, basically.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're by no means are we the only people as well,
Yeah,
clearly
yeah.
in the town who do, who are able to offer support. And so, yeah, I think there are a number of ways in which people can, like I say, sort of volunteer. I mean, I regularly see actually on Facebook, people sort of saying, "I want to volunteer my time. Where can I go to help?" And which is great. So I think there are ways in which people certainly, yeah, can connect with us to do that, particularly over the winter. I guess it's an obvious
Mm,
time for that. Um, and then I think as well, though, again, just stopping and having a conversation
mm,
with somebody, smiling, being kind, that goes a long way
yeah,
to helping people. And obviously, sometimes not everybody responds positively. And again, people can then be like, "Oh, I tried to give a sandwich to this person, they were rude, and you should take what you want, you take what you can get, blah blah."
yeah, yeah,
But again, I just think, but hold on a minute, we're not always in a good mood,
yeah,
and
yeah.
when you're tired and cold and hungry, you're not always in a good mood. And again, I think we just have to be really careful
Mm,
not to let our judgments get the better of us. So yeah, I think helping by being kind, um, for sure, contacting organisations like us, around how can, what can we do to help. We're always
mm.
willing to have chats about that.
I'm so guilty of that as well, like trying to offer a sandwich or something and saying, "Oh, we didn't want that." Well, why do I bother? Again, me just not taking that moment to think, he's probably been sat there all day, freezing
Yeah.
cold, doesn't really want a cold cheese sandwich. Like,
Well, I guess like
that's
you
me
though.
thinking I'm helping, but actually I'm probably not.
Yeah, I guess like for you though, maybe I guess all of us just like to be asked. So if
Mm,
it's just the point of, is there anything I can do to help,
yeah,
rather than assuming
mm,
I've got this and therefore you should take it.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
and so that's generally my response is when I see people is I'll ask, is there anything I can do to help? Or what would you? I'm going into shop. Is there anything you'd like me to get? And then all of us want choices, right? Just because someone's sleeping on the street doesn't mean they're not allowed a choice. And sometimes it's not possible to do what they
Mm,
are asking, but at least I've asked.
mm,
So
yeah, I need to ask more, I think. Thank you very much for coming in. It was really, really good to understand what you guys are doing, and what sort of the future looks like. Um, and yeah, it's a lot more positive than maybe people would have thought. So really appreciate that. And I hope the shelter goes well, and supports as many people as it can. And yeah, maybe we'll come along and volunteer and help out.
I would love to have you. Be
Yeah.
great.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, maybe we'll speak after the shelter and see how it all went.
That'd be great. Thanks,
Brilliant.
Luke.
Thank you very much.
Okay.